And we're back with another jttv. And on this segment, that's Talk Time with Ty, and I have a little guest over right now, and his name is Brendan. Here he is.
Hello.
That's Brendan. And what we're gonna do today, I'm actually outside. Don't tell my dogs that. We're sneaking up on them. If you're noticing that my camera, like, it's all screwed up. This isn't actually a special effect. Make a long story short, I dropped my computer, my PC. So, yeah. So what we're gonna try to do here, we're gonna do this. Look, see, we have a map. If you can wait 1 sec, I'm gonna just take the camera. They're like, yeah, we're gonna make a map out of like dirt. Wait 1 sec. Yeah, like right there.
Okay. Here's us, and here's the fence. And here are the dogs. We have to get here without being caught by the dogs. So, I don't know what to do.
Neither do I. Now,
Let's just do it.
what we're gonna do here is what you call a winging. Well, we're just gonna wing it. Yeah, you can. Okay. Now, what we're gonna do here, we're gonna point my computer over there where the dogs are, and you'll see how we do. Okay? 1 sec. I'll put it up there. 1 sec. Yeah. I'm just sort of scared that my computer's gonna fall off. Okay. Is that good enough? Is that as good enough? Yeah, it is. Okay. Now let's find out how to get back there. See you in a bit. Okay, let's go. Don't shake it, it'll fall down. Goldie, take that out of your mouth! Stop chasing me! I want it to fall! Help me!
Goodbye.
Wait, no! And that is what you never mess with my dogs.
There's a pretty light right there. I put my nose to the camera. Are we done?
Yeah, sure, why not?
Bye!
See you next time on JTV.